Hey y'all, it's Megan. If you're returning to my channel, welcome back, and if you're new, welcome aboard. So as promised, today is going to be a Disney movie fact, history, trivia, all that good stuff, and today we're going to talk about Sword in the Stone. So thanks, John, for requesting that. I know that some people have also expressed interest in some more history and fun fact videos. I'm glad y'all seem to like those just as much as I do, so we're going to get started with the history of the Sword in the Stone. So the Sword in the Stone was released in America in December of 1963. So it's pretty early in the history of Disney animated movies as far as, you know, Disney has come. But it was, in fact, the first in a lot of different ways. The Sword in the Stone was the first Disney movie to be directed by only one person. I am so sorry. Athena has her little Chewy down here, and it keeps her entertained, but it's so loud, so I'm so sorry that y'all have to listen to her chomp. It's either that or she is going to be all up in everyone's business right now, so try to ignore the chomping in the background. So the Sword in the Stone actually only had one director, and that was the first of its kind for the Disney animated films, because up until then it had been 3 or 4, you know, a team of directors that were working on each film. And this one was just one guy. It was one of the original 9 grumpy men. 12 Angry Men is a movie. One of the original 9 old men who were the animators and part of Walt's like central crew to begin with, and that was Wolfgang Woolley Reitherman. I'm bad at names, I guess. So he was the sole director of the Sword in the Stone, which was kind of a big deal because, like I said, they had been working in teams of directors up until that point. So I think it's interesting, maybe look at the Sword in the Stone knowing that there was one director and then compare it to some of the previous Disney animated classics and see if you can tell if the storyline seems to flow any better or if it's not quite as strong based on the fact that there was only one director keeping everything going. You know, something interesting for if you are interested in like the behind the scenes of cinematography and all that. So something to look for if that's something that interests you. Another first single guy was, there was only one screenwriter for the Sword in the Stone, and that was Bill Peet. He took inspiration, obviously this was Walt's idea, but they took inspiration from the T.H. White book, The Sword in the Stone, which later, that was released in 1938, and it later became part of a trilogy known as The Once and Future King. I'm sure you've heard of it. So if you didn't know that Sword in the Stone was something besides a Disney movie or just, you know, general King Arthur and the Round Table kind of history, there's actually a book that the movie is, you know, pretty closely based on. So if you're interested in reading a really long version of the short movie, you can go and check that out. But it was written, the screenplay was written by that one guy, Bill Peet, and he and Walt didn't totally get along all that great. He kind of saw Walt as being a little bit cantankerous is the word that I saw used in my research. He was kind of argumentative, but he was also very playful and very imaginative. So he didn't hate Walt. He admired Walt, but he also was like, Walt, sometimes you're a little serious, my man. I need you to bring it down. Another kind of big first in the Disney world was, this was the first Disney movie that featured the Sherman brothers, Richard and Robert Sherman, who were gonna go on to do all of the great Disney songs. I think that now that I know that this is the Sherman brothers, I think the song that Merlin sings to get all of the pots and books and everything packed into the little tiny suitcase, I think that's my favorite Sherman Brothers song, which is probably a super unpopular opinion, but it's so fun and it's so catchy, and I'm not gonna sing it because ears will bleed bad, but it's so fun, and I can't believe that it's a Sherman Brothers song because it's so different from the kind of serious songs from Mary Poppins that I'm used to. But this was the first Sherman Brothers Disney collab, and I think it's my favorite. So I mentioned that the movie was based off of the book by T.H. White, and it stuck pretty closely to the storyline. The only main difference was that they made it a little less philosophical than it was in the book, because this is a kids movie. You know, it can't be super deep, but it did get across the main idea that everyone is born good and people have the ability to be something special. As long as you're always trying to learn and better yourself, then anything's possible, and maybe you can be the King of England. You know, maybe we don't go that far in reality, but that's the main takeaway from the story. Disney just kind of not dumbed it down, but put the kid gloves on to make it more easily understood by kids and make sure that the main point is really driven home. So since the story didn't change all that much between the book and the movie, there's not all that much history. I've talked about who was involved with it and that kind of thing, but now we're gonna move on to my favorite part, the trivia, the fun facts. That's my favorite thing in the world. I mentioned earlier that Bill Peet did not love Walt. They were not like super best friends, and I mentioned that he kind of thought that he was a little bit argumentative, but still playful and fun, and that is where he got the inspiration in his design of the movie. He was inspired by Walt to make Merlin, and that is how the character of Merlin has been adapted. And he actually took some of Walt's physical features, like his nose. He specifically modeled Merlin's nose after Walt for some reason. Merlin's kind of grumpy sometimes, but Merlin's also really caring and really loving towards Wart, and he really wants to help him. And sometimes he's a little sarcastic, but he does everything with love, even though sometimes he's a little grumpy gills. So that was taken from what Bill Peet thought of Walt. Obviously, he still had respect for him, but he didn't totally think of him as Uncle Walt like some of us do. Speaking of Dear Uncle Walt, this was the last film that he was alive for the premiere. It premiered in '63, and then obviously Walt did pass away before the next feature film. The Jungle Book was released in '67. He died in '66. So he died while Jungle Book was in production, and so this was the last one that he was alive for the release. And when you think about it that way, it's interesting to see if you can see a line where these were the movies that Walt worked on and these are the ones that he maybe wasn't completely involved. Maybe it's just his legacy, maybe some of his ideas from the past, but he did not actually work on them physically himself. So it's crazy to think how many Disney animated movies have come after Walt's passing, because there's more now that came after him than he worked on while he was alive. And that's just a testament to his legacy, I guess. It's really fascinating to think about just how many movies have been made just because of this one guy's ideas, even though he is no longer around. Something that I've mentioned in a couple of my previous fun fact and history videos about movies is Disney animation likes to reuse some imagery, and you can tell that in The Sword and the Stone in a couple of different places. One of the most obvious recycled animation sequences is in the hunting scene when Kay and Wart are out hunting, and Kay is going to shoot a deer. That deer may look a little familiar. It's the animation from Bambi. It's Bambi's mom. So not that these two storylines overlap, but Disney does tend to reuse some of their animation when they can. So Bambi's mom makes a cameo, I guess, in The Sword and the Stone. There's a connection between The Sword and the Stone and The Jungle Book, which, you know, they came one right after the other. The scene where Wart is getting attacked with licks and kisses from the castle dogs, that animation is reused in The Jungle Book when Mowgli gets attacked by the wolf siblings that come up and lick and love on him. You can tell that the scene from The Sword and the Stone was reused so that they could have that imagery for The Jungle Book. My last couple of fun facts are about the voice actors in the movie. That's some of my favorite research to do, is what else have these people been in that you might recognize the voice but not necessarily know who they are. So Sebastian Cabot is the narrator at the beginning, and he's also Sir Ector, because he just has a little bitty part of narration at the very beginning. But his voice, I've always known that I recognized it, but I didn't know why. And he is the narrator from The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and a couple of the Winnie the Pooh shorts up until 1977 when he passed away. And he was also Bagheera from The Jungle Book, who was also one of my favorite characters. I named a cat after Bagheera when I was little. She was my little house panther and I loved her. Now that you know that, next time you watch any of these movies, you can be like, oh yeah, totally know that voice. That's where he's from. And another one of the voice actors that I've always known was very familiar. You want to say hi? Say hi. Oh, I know. Thank you for the kisses. One of the other voices that I knew, that I recognized, was the voice of Archimedes, which is Junius I'll write it down here, Matthews, and he also is Rabbit from The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. So those two guys worked together a couple of different times. Archimedes is my favorite character from The Sword and the Stone, and Rabbit is my brother in organization, so I really connect to both of those characters, so I really appreciate his voice acting. The last fun fact about the voice actors is there were actually 3 kids who played Wart. And this is super, super obvious now that you know that. You probably noticed it before and were just like, man, that kid's voice changes a lot. But the original kid who was playing Wart, actually his voice changed. He was hitting that age where your voice changes for young gentlemen, and he couldn't physically speak in the high-pitched kid voice that they needed for Wart anymore. So the director actually called his sons in, and he had 2 sons who were young guys, and they filled in for the voices. So there were 3 different actors who all played Wart, and you can definitely tell sometimes in the movie the voice will change from scene to scene, and you're like, what is going on with this kid's voice? It's 3 different kids. That's the problem. So that is it for the fun facts and history about the Sword and the Stone. If you have any other movies that you'd like to see some new information about, let me know those down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, y'all.